Hey everybody, it's Kevin.
And Steve, hi all.
Hey, we're here in Steve's Playroom in Denver, Colorado, and this morning we're going to talk about ego. A nice little subject, don't you think, Steve?
Well, I wouldn't call it a nice little subject. I would call it a nice huge subject.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many facets to the ego subject, for sure, and it's one thing that I think we need to say right off the bat is that we're not here to bash the ego. The ego is a very, very important part of our human experience. And I think that's something that we both agree with. But interestingly, we have a little difference of opinion as to the ego's role and what happens in cases where the ego is out of balance. And so I think in this video, you're going to see a little bit of a disagreement is probably too big a word, but different perspective on it that you and I both have. So, what do you think?
That's true. In essence, though, I think we're in agreement that the ego serves a valuable purpose. It has an appropriate role, but as we have all seen, there are many occasions where it can cause hardships and challenges, both internally to us as well as between people. And it's kind of the process of reining it in to do what it is useful at doing and allow it to do that without trying to force it out of our lives, which we can't. I
Mm-mm.
see that as being like trying to force our arm out of our existence. We can't, because it's part of us and it's
Mm-hmm.
an appropriate part of us and it serves a valuable function. Though when it's out of balance, as we might say, it causes challenges for us, and it's those challenges that we want to get a mastery over.
Yeah, I think to start with, though, we might want to mention what the ego's here to do. And I think that purpose is to create a sense of individuality for ourselves compared to the rest of humanity. And you might say, well, that doesn't sound like a very purposeful thing or a very good thing to do. But if your belief system is that we all came from a spirit realm where we're all one to begin with, then that's what makes the human experience unique, is that creation of an individual self. And then to find a balance between that and the connection that we have to all of humanity, which transcends the human experience.
That's true, and I think that we would agree. Most of the people who would be listening to this video and contributing to the conversation are people who are on the spiritual path and trying to gain some mastery over the ego is a fundamental effort or challenge of people who are trying to become spiritually enlightened,
Mm-hmm.
trying to gain mastery over themselves within themselves. The ego is one of the, if not the greatest obstacle to that self mastery. Does that mean it's a bad thing? No, and
No.
that's what we were just saying.
Right.
It provides that individuality, which is necessary and appropriate for the human experience. We want to be individuals. We don't want to just all be one. There's
Right.
value in having that individuality, and the ego provides that for us.
Yeah.
But again, it can provide some serious challenges and create grief in our life when it is not in balance.
Yeah. Yep. And I think another role of the ego is to help facilitate experiences in this human life, and so that is a very valuable role that the ego has in this situation. Because my feeling is that the ego sort of falls away along with the body as soon as we die, and our spirit essence is what survives the human experience. And so um, I think I think there's a value to it, and I think you've heard us say now a number of times that it's not helpful when it's out of balance. And I think we also agree that the ego is not really present so much when we live moment by moment. The ego tends to like to live in the future, where it's setting up experiences, as we talked about, or living in the past, kind of rehashing things that have happened to us. And so when we do live in the moment, I believe that's where the ego self is sort of muted or becomes muted.
Right, and so I think some spiritual perspectives uh, may proffer the idea that it's good to always be in the moment. Well, there in the human experience, there is a use for being able to see into the future and into the past. You have to plan experiences because of the serial nature of experience on Earth. That's valuable. What you don't want to do is get caught up in the future or the past to the exclusion of
Right.
the present. So it's a situation of balance.
It is of having experiences in the moment and having experiences where you're letting the ego dictate the future or dwell on the past. Um, the place where I think you and I have a difference of opinion, Steve, occurs in the fact that I believe that the balance point for ego is spirit, and spirit is love, and ego tends to be more focused on fear and drama and some of the negative aspects, because that's what we're here to deal with, are those sort of negative aspects, because we don't have those up in the spirit world, and so there's a contrast there. But my belief is that the good parts of ego and the good parts of spirit work together to create a pretty nice experience in the human realm. It gets out of whack sometimes when the ego starts spinning out of control with the sort of those negative aspects, the fear, the drama, and things like that, where they begin to rule your life. And that's where I believe we need to find a way to bring spirit back into the picture to counterbalance the ego.
Right. I think that a good way to kind of bring these ideas into focus is a great example that Kevin has used for himself of where the ego comes into play, but can be appropriately balanced. And the example is, so Kevin is a triathlete. He's done this for years, and he had to spend a time away from it when he had to deal with some knee injuries. But he's back into it now and wants to do another triathlon. And there are a lot of instances in this journey, this triathlon journey, where the ego can be imbalanced and plays an appropriate role in the planning and in the execution of this human experience of the triathlon. But the ego can also be way out of balance in other situations where it pushes you too hard, or it tries to gain certain notoriety for itself, or there are a lot of different ways in which the ego plays appropriately, or you could say inappropriately, into this scenario. So maybe you can kind of
No, that's so I have an issue sometimes where I over push myself, and I'm ultra competitive with myself, and to the detriment of myself. And I believe that is an imbalance in the ego, because I don't have a way of dialing back to a reasonable level the intensity that I push myself. And I'm actually looking forward to this next triathlon, because that's a goal of mine, is to try to rein in that competitiveness and try to have a balance of enjoying the experience but not basically killing myself in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and it's an example of where the ego plays an appropriate role in giving us some interesting experiences. I mean, we could just sit on our couch and meditate and be in the moment 24/7, but then that wouldn't be taking advantage of why we're here on Earth, which is to have experiences. And the ego helps to define those experiences and to give them color and flavor, and give us something really to sink our teeth into here. But at the same time, it can cause us great grief as we get too competitive. We feel like we failed, we didn't meet our best time, or we ended up making a mistake that cost us many seconds, and then having grief over that. And so it's an interplay between appropriate ego and inappropriate ego.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's something we definitely agree on. this is a starting point for the discussion on ego. I envision us having many more discussions on other aspects of ego, because it's such an important part of our experience here, and it weaves itself. I mean, it's part of who we are, and so we can't. You're going to find us talking about ego in other discussions, but I think for now, I think that we've kind of thrown out some aspects of ego that people can talk about and expound upon, or disagree with, because really we haven't gotten too much into your disagreement with how I look at ego versus spirit. And maybe as part of a follow-up discussion, we can dive into that difference.
Right. Yeah, I was tempted to get into that, but didn't want to get too far on a tangent and make this preliminary introduction to the subject be too long-winded.
Right.
What I did want to accomplish, we did want to accomplish, is to kind of start the conversation. And as Kevin mentioned, there are so many different directions you can go. This could be a days-long conversation about the subject of the ego. I think that there are certain focuses about it that are particularly of interest to people who are on the spiritual path, because there are challenges where the ego needs to really be reined in order to advance spiritually, and that's where it's particularly of interest to probably most of the people who are going to be in this conversation with us. So anyway, that's a place to start. We look forward to having you all give us your thoughts, your experiences. How do you see the ego playing into your life and the lives of others around you? And how do you manage that? How do you bring a sense of mastery so that it's not dominating your life, but it's appropriately placed in your life, so it's doing what it needs to do?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, exactly. Give us your thoughts.
Right. So thanks for listening to this part, and let us hear from you.
All right. Good talks, guys. Good to be with you, man. Oh, this thing. Okay. See ya.
Bye.
Did I do it?